Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info coming at you after the conclusion of the Coca-Cola 373.5 after the 600-mile race was rather anticlimactically concluded with Christopher Bell being your winner of the rain and, I guess, a humidity-shortened event here today. A bit, yeah. I mean, I'm trying to soft pedal this here, folks, but I'm just pretty disappointed with how that turned out. But it is what it is. The never-ending battle between NASCAR and Mother Nature goes on for another week, and I don't know what the solution is. Whether it's been the Air Titans or the Groove tires, or schedule realignments or anything else. But I guess this is just going to be the era of Bill France weather, where the Daytona 500, for example, was never rain delayed or something like that. We're just not living in that era right now. So, yeah, no, that's awful. That's too bad, because I really want to come on here and I want to talk about how great of racing we had in the Indy 500 and really the Xfinity race at Charlotte this weekend too. And we will talk about that. And I want to definitely talk about After Allen, the video premiere from last week, beginning a 3-part series continuing through the next couple weeks, because we did have some technical issues on our show last week for North Wilkesboro. I do, again, apologize for that. I made some other runs at it, rebooted our router, tried a number of things. By then, it was getting too late, and I do apologize we couldn't get a full show in there. So hopefully tonight we'll be able to make up for that there, and we'll go from there. So, yeah, I guess we can look at the 600 here to lead off. Christopher Bell, unofficially your winner, pending the results of post-race inspection, which I'm sure are probably going to get hurried up here with the conditions. And again, I think the other reason it's disappointing is NASCAR was doing a tremendous job of trying to get this event in and trying to coordinate it with Kyle Larson's schedule with the IndyCar race, which itself was, of course, affected by weather today, too. Very fortunate. I was surprised to get anything in for that race, frankly, much less all of it in this late in the day there too. So that was definitely very surprising at the same time. But NASCAR was doing everything they could to drive the track here. And, if they say the humidity was a difference here, that it was going to take well into the late hours. Honestly, it's not even 9 o'clock here on the West Coast. So, and this being a holiday weekend, I don't have any problem with staying up that late, but I can't really speak for anybody that's out there on the East Coast, dealing with it firsthand there, whether it's the media or other people out there. So again, just an unfortunate situation. Not the first time it's happened. Not the worst 600 I've seen. This was not nearly as terrible as 2009 was, when it was rain delayed till Monday. And just, even though David Rudiman won his first race, and that was really cool, a lot of the emotion of that was sucked out of the day there, just waiting for the race to be called. And unfortunately, that wasn't very good, which was a shame, because that was the 50th anniversary running of the race back then. So, again, this race had its moments. We saw some daring moves out there. William Byron with a not quite pass in the grass there, cutting through the turf there, and having a third place finish here. Fine performance, especially after spinning out in practice, and very easily could have been in a situation like some of the other drivers were earlier this weekend here, where they had to really come back from a pre-race penalty. So a fine showing for him there. Brad Keselowski getting second. Again, another strong run there, as they mentioned in the broadcast. Really, since Chris Buescher's runner-up finish there at Kansas, they've really turned the corner there on that program in general. And we've already known that RFK has a strong program out there. We saw it last year with Buescher. Now we have Brad Keselowski winning at Darlington a couple weeks ago. And then even over to Penske with Logano dominating the All-Star race last week. They've definitely turned the corner there too. The Toyotas seem to have the measure of the field there at the beginning. Tyler Reddick came back from a pass-through penalty at the beginning that put him in last place, and it took him about 30 laps to even catch the next to last place car in the lineup there. The fact that he finished fourth in this race, especially the fact that he didn't go the full distance, was great for him. Ty Gibbs seemed to really have the field covered. I was wondering if we were going to have another moment like we saw with Jeff Gordon or Matt Kenseth or Bobby Labonte, that all won their first Cup Series races in the Coca-Cola 600, especially on the anniversary running of Jeff Gordon's first win here in 1994. It seemed like the stars were lining up for that. However, we just didn't get the race to the conclusion. I think if we did, Gibbs was probably still going to be a factor, although he did have that pretty hard contact with the outside wall that undoubtedly did some kind of damage to his car there, dropping him back in the order. But regardless, salvaging a sixth-place finish out of that, things could certainly have been worse there. Chase Elliott in 7th, Ross Chastain in 8th, Alex Bowman in the 9th spot, and Josh Berry rounding out the top 10. Again, another fine run for him. Seems like when adversity is at its highest, Berry is able to get a good run out of there, especially with all that may or may not be going on with the Stewart-Haas racing program here, with rumors swirling around this week. Have to give a shout out to Justin Allgaier, and a lot of it was already mentioned in this broadcast here, and I definitely wanted to add to that there. A very difficult situation. This was not, as it seemed to be indicated in the broadcast, this was not his first attempt driving a next-gen car. He'd been driving for Beard Motorsports. He drove for Spire Motorsports. In fact, on the Bristol Dirt Race. The problem is that just about every time that Allgaier has been a relief driver in the Cup Series, he has had just absolutely terrible luck. Just never able to capitalize on it, never able to get a good run out of it. And it's not that he's not a good driver. He is. And I think that in his own full-time Cup tenure, when he was driving for H. Scott Motorsports, it was just not the right team and not the right time. And I think his stock went down a bit there, and he had to really rebuild his career driving for JR Motorsports. And even this weekend, we saw him battling for the lead in Saturday's race, in the Xfinity Series race. Unfortunately, got wrecked out of it. Couldn't have been more of a factor there. But again, he's, I think, still one of the top talents in the NASCAR Xfinity Series right now. And if the charter system or whatever other mechanics need to be moved here for him to get back into the Cup Series, I think he would be a fine addition, much like we've seen out of A.J. Allmendinger and some of these other drivers that have had to kind of take a step back and kind of reorganize their careers a bit here. But definitely getting into this one too, with a very high pressure ride with Kyle Larson attempting the double here between Indianapolis and the 600. Attempt, of course, is the word with the delays that we had that was no longer possible. Him getting in the car in very short notice, with no practice and no qualifying in the car, since Larson had practiced and qualified the car in the 10th position. Getting in the car, and at the back of the field, I was watching it, of course, doing the last place coverage here, and he wasn't gaining a lot of spots in the opening laps, but what he was also not doing was tearing up the car or getting in any kind of a situation that was going to make it more difficult for Larson. What he was doing is he was fighting tooth and nail to keep that thing on the lead lap. And as he did that, as you know, you still had dominant runs by Ty Gibbs and other drivers in the field here, he was doing that. And getting up there in the 13th place there at the finish, I mean, probably one of his best Cup finishes, if not his best total. I believe he had a top 10 finish when he was in one of his other rides here too. But you know, a tremendously high pressure situation there. And it just seemed like things were just falling into place with Kyle Larson arriving at the track and being able to switch out with Allgaier under the rain delay. They could take their time with the driver's switch, drop to the tail end of the field, and perhaps in the last 170 or so laps, Larson could have made a charge at the end there. But I think he did a tremendous job out there. We've seen a lot of drivers really serve well as a relief driver here in recent years. Regan Smith, before his broadcasting career here at Fox, seems like he was really kind of capitalizing on those runs. Alex Bowman had that role before he took over the 88 after Dale Jr.'s retirement as well. And then you go further back, you think in 500 days, talking about Johnny Utzman, helping out Benny Parsons, winning a race at Bristol and almost winning another race later on in that season. You know, tremendous. We could have had a really interesting story there too, with Larson taking over, and Allgaier would have been a very big part of it. I think that part of me, you know, I couldn't help but make the comparison to the Milwaukee deal with Eric Almirola and Denny Hamlin, although our Ben Schneider was very right to point out some very clear differences between those two examples, and I thank him for that. Because I know he's very passionate about that particular race in particular. I know he did a video on his channel about it, and if you haven't seen it, I'd recommend you check that out there as well. Yeah, this was definitely not a situation where a ride was being taken away from somebody or an opportunity was being taken away. I think from Allgaier's standpoint right at the beginning, as Ben made it very clear as well, yeah, I mean, it was understood that Kyle Larson was going to be in there. I mean, this was the H1100 car that was going to be the big deal here with the ride at Indy. And the moment that he got there, Allgaier was going to step out of the car. And Allgaier was very good in his interviews. We're seeing that on social media that if the race went the rest of the way and Larson did somehow pull off the victory, Allgaier was going to be there in victory lane for sure. And that's fantastic. That's much like you would hear with Johnny Hutzman or Regan Smith or some of these others from the past in different situations there. And while it's too bad that neither Allgaier nor Larson got a chance to run even better and prove even more excellent in this, I think that 13th place finish was not only a good effort for the team, but again, more importantly for Allgaier, because he has had, again, I can't overestimate how many awful runs he's had. I believe at the Bristol Dirt Race, he was in last place. I know that at Indianapolis, when Johnson had COVID and he stepped into the car, he got wrecked on pit road and was involved in that and was almost in last place. It just seemed to happen over and over again. Driving in replacement of Michael Annett when they were teammates at H. Scott, same thing happened too. He's been a feature more times than I can count on the NASCAR side. Not so much on the Xfinity side, which is, again, I think is a good measure of how successful he's been there, but certainly on the Cup side, that's been the case there at the same time. So definitely wanted to mention that. But a fine job for him and a beautiful paint scheme. Definitely on to wear the shirt here today. I didn't really have anything for show and tell today. I was going to celebrate Ricky Rudd's induction into the Hall of Fame because I had my Ricky Rudd fan club stuff somewhere. I just couldn't find it. I was still digging for it during the red flag here. Maybe down the road, if I finally stumble across it, that'll be a show and tell feature on here. And I want to talk more about Rudd here on the show too. Definitely got a lot to cover here. Hopefully the internet stays up on here at the same time too. So we should hopefully be okay on that. But let's see. Going down the rest of the order, let's talk about the last place battle here at the same time. J.J. Yaley, and a big thanks to Colby Evans for following up more on this, because I didn't listen to the 44's radio unless they were in last place, which they hardly were really in this race until he actually had the mechanical issue. And by that point, he pretty much got out of the car. Apparently, according to him, that Yaley had lost power steering 55 laps into the race. And 55 laps into a 400-lap race, as it seemed like it was going to be at the time, is quite the tall order. Even if you're going to have those stage cautions at the quarter, halfway, and three-quarter mark of the race. Difficult situation. We've seen a lot of mechanical issues out of the New York racing team since they've come up here. It seems like fuel pump issues have been the problem, much like we saw with Live Fast Motorsports when BJ McLeod was getting those last car championships the last couple of years. But this was definitely a different situation there, and he had to fight the car around the track, and the fact that he completed 114 laps, I think that is worthy also of some recognition here. It's unfortunate that it was a last place run. BJ McLeod himself was in the race in a combined effort with Live Fast and the Motorsports Business Management team owned by Carl Long. BJ was towards the back of the field there when Yaley pulled behind the wall, and Yaley actually exited the race pretty much about the same time that Newgarden was flagged the winner of the Indy 500 this afternoon, which is kind of an interesting bit of timing. I, like many of you, were watching both races at the same time there during those opening laps, and it really covered about the first 125 laps or so of the Coke 600 were the last portion of the Indy 500 there, which was a tremendous experience too. I know it's a bit different from what we usually have. We usually have a very short gap between the end of the Indy 500 and the start of the 600 here, but of course the weather changed all those plans up there. But regardless, the first last place run for the number 44 at Charlotte in the Cup points race, the first last place finish by reason of steering issues at Charlotte, and the 22nd of J.J. Yaley's Cup Series career, I believe the 41st of his NASCAR career across the top three series. Again, difficult effort there for him there. But again, this was driver at the same time, and I wanted to feature this also in the article, that he started last after spinning out in Xfinity qualifying and actually climbed up to finish just outside the top 20, I believe 21st in the Xfinity Series race there too. So some positives there at the same time. And Jonathan Cohen, I think, again, is one of the more interesting team owners out there. I know they're not the most regular presence in the Cup Series field there, but I'm glad to see these open teams even out there. That was one of, I think, the big positives from this weekend on the Cup Series side there, is we had our first 40-car field, which is technically a full field, although I have a very different view of what that definition is. The first 40-car field at a race other than the Daytona 500 since Kansas in the fall of 2021. So a tremendous effort there by these teams to come out. Carl Long's team was pretty much one of the last ones to be entered, again, in that combined effort with BJ McLeod. We saw what's basically the money team come back into the sport, although it's no longer affiliated with Floyd Mayweather, at least at this point. The latest reports seem to be this Amerivet sponsorship is now kind of stepped in with some of the original partners on the TMT effort there. And hopefully we'll see them make some more starts. We haven't seen them really since last season. We've seen the number 50 run more often with 2311, like we did with Kamui Kobayashi, and we're going to see out of Corey Heim at Nashville later this year. But good to see him back in the field there, too. So we had those three teams, and then on top of that, we had Jimmy Johnson enter the race there, too, in another open entry, and then you got your 40-car field from there. They ended up pretty spread out here, at least a little bit. We had Ty Dillon in the 36th spot, driving in the number 50 entry, B.J. McLeod in the 37th spot. Right between them, you had Noah Gragson and Ryan Blaney, both eliminated in accidents. Blaney with what looked to be a loose right front wheel. The wheel almost completely carved itself free, but luckily he came down pit road before that happened, but unfortunately after he made contact with the outside wall, and Ryan Blaney drops out, and the defending winner of the 600 ends up in the 39th position in this race. Noah Gragson in 38th, McLeod and Dillon rounding out your bottom five runners here too. Corey LaJoie and Kaz Gralla both had time in the last position there at one point or another. Most of that was during the green flag pit stops earlier in the race. They ended up cycling a little bit further up the order. You had LaJoie in the 35th spot and Gralla in 34th. Rest of the field through here, looking for other drivers to kind of stand out. Justin Haley, 22nd place finish, not too bad for them. Although, again, I'm sure they're looking at top 15s, top 10s for how excited Haley was about that team at the beginning of this year. Unfortunately, not really able to cash that in. Front Row Motorsports gets its team cars in 16th and 17th. Michael McDowell ahead of Todd Gilliland. Bubba Wallace looked good at points in this race as well. Gets just outside the top 10 in the 11th spot. Beautiful scheme. Love the unveil at the new airspeed shop. Or I guess just airspeed. I guess they don't call it a shop for the 2311 effort out there. Really excited by the fan events that they have at the track around the Charlotte area leading into the 600. It's good to see that tradition still alive and well. And a lot of fans seem to have a great time at that. So good efforts on that this week here. Don't have too much more to add on the 600 here in general. But yeah, again, congratulations to Christopher Bell. I know a driver that has a bit of a chip on his shoulder for being overlooked and pulling off a win in a crown jewel race, even if it's rain shortened, is definitely a good way to get some more attention, at least for 1 week. And we'll see when the inevitable fisticuffs or whatever is going to happen at Gateway next week overshadows that. We'll just play it by ear from there. So enough about that. I want to get into some fun stuff here. Let's talk about the Indy 500 right here. Probably, and this is high praise here, I think that was probably the most exhilarating Indy 500 I've certainly seen in recent memory. I'm not as much of a student of the history of that race as like David Land or FP1 Will or those guys would be in that respect there. But I was nailed to my chair here. I'm just riveted. It was absolutely tremendous. I hope people enjoyed it. I know there's been the controversy with the Penske deal with what happened at St. Petersburg this year. And I know that, it reminded me very much of when Elio Castroneves came in after he looked like he was going to be going to jail. And then in a case that ultimately he was not. And then he won the 2009 Indy 500. Kind of had a little bit of, the coloring of that going on there. But Joseph Newgarden just drove a whale of a race out there. It wasn't the only one to do so. There were so many stars in this one that had different strategies and, different moments up there. We saw Connor Daly up there. Stingray Robb really having a career run, I would have to say. What I've known about his career is what I could piece together from our William Saki and his articles on the IndyCar coverage there. Again, fantastic name, the derivative of like a Lake Speed kind of name in the sport there too. He was incredible. I couldn't believe how well he was running out there, even with the different strategies. And then of course, Kyle Larson on top of all of this, as disappointed as I'm sure he is of, the botched restart that he had. I guess it was on the first restart there. He was just caught sleeping. There's no Geico restart zone, I guess, in IndyCar, or at least not the same way. And then the pit road issue, the pit road speeding issue there towards the end, he did a tremendous job out there. I think he has got nothing to hang his head down about. I'm sure it bothers him that he didn't do better than that, but I hope he hangs on to that and gives it another run next year. I would love to see him do it. I think he had a beautiful car out there, and hopefully next year, the one thing he couldn't control out of the entire month, if the weather is just a little bit more favorable and he can actually attempt to run both races, he's going to find himself in a much better shape to approach that. I think that just the experience of the racecraft out there, I think everybody knew was going to be the big obstacle for him in that effort. And I think he did a really, really tremendous job. I'm very proud of him for what he accomplished, what he, the McLaren team, and the Hendrick team combined together. I know that sounds like an embarrassment of riches that you have just a very talented driver and very high profile teams putting it together, but it still takes the person behind the wheel to actually drive that thing up there, and he was doing it, and that was really cool. And it's a great throwback to 10 years since Kurt Busch, or 30 years since John Andretti, and everything in between with Tony Stewart and Robbie Gordon and the others that had attempted it along the way. A great throwback and a great promotion too. I really enjoyed following that story since it was announced. It was actually kind of fun when they played last year's Indy 500 and you got to see Larson on pit road and being excited about attempting it this year. I thought that was actually kind of cool. Although, I mean, I do think it would be more interesting to watch much older Indy 500s there on the broadcast, but that would be something else to work with. But a fine job by him there. And again, I don't think they have anything to hang their heads about. And it would have been great to see Larson be able to cap that off by at least getting in the 5 car there for the 600. Unfortunately, just wasn't meant to be. And hopefully next year, get a fresh start or whenever that's going to be, and just get another run at it. But a tremendous month of May for him there. I think he goes into Gateway feeling pretty refreshed, I think, about all that. So we'll see how that goes. On the other side of it, too, another driver that undoubtedly is going to be very frustrated. And indeed, we saw the very raw frustration there on pit road. Pato O'Ward, a tremendous, tremendous run. My goodness. That battle he had with Joseph Newgarden, it was going to be bad for whoever lost that. Because you can tell that it was just going to be a matter of just strategy and who was going to be leading at the right time or the wrong time and who was going to be able to make the right pass. Just that move that Newgarden made, it was just like Ryan Hunter-Reay's deal going to the grass, in 2014 there. I mean, it was just one too many, and you couldn't respond there in time, and that was the end of that. But again, a tremendous effort. I believe a career best for him. I mean, must be, since he hasn't won that race yet too. But I mean, certainly a great rebound. Didn't he have a big crash in this race last year too? I mean, I think he did an amazing job out that too. So I think that was a great effort there at the same time. Scott Dixon completes a podium with Alexander Rossi in the 4th spot, Alex Palou in the 5th position, Scott McLaughlin, the pole sitter. That was my pick to win the race there, and I know many others as well. I was very smitten by his pretty cool attitude, which I think is what you need to have to be able to actually capitalize on such an intense and prestigious race. And we saw that out of Kyle Larson, but we very much saw that out of McLaughlin too. And some of the moves he was making were just absolutely incredible. Tremendous breakaway effort for him. Kyle Kirkwood in the 7th position there. Fine job for him. Then you had Santino Ferrucci there for the AJ Foyt team. Again, talking about his teammate Stingray Robb, also having a great run. Rinus VeeKay, Lasbro's dark horse pick there, was another driver to certainly watch on this. It seems like his day is coming, very soon too. And if he could put a full race together and be able to capitalize on the speed he consistently shows in qualifying, even if he just wrecked the car earlier in the day, tremendous job there. And then Connor Daly rounding out the top 10. Again, looked like he was going to be the winner. Looked like we saw out of him a couple years ago there before he hit the tire on the racetrack there. Just a amazing effort. So again, other drivers that fell a bit further back in the order. We saw some flashes out of Elio Castroneves there. Ed Carpenter had some issues on pit road. Graham Rahal comes from the last starting spot to finish in 15th. And then you have a litany of accidents through this race here. Seemed like we were going to have a 1992 scenario with entirely too many cautions. And luckily we finished this race within half an hour of the curfew, which was fantastic to get all 200 laps in. Certainly nothing I expected from all the gloom and doom I was hearing this entire week about the weather reports coming into Indy this week. But that blew through pretty quick. the Hair Titans came up to, were ready for the task there and getting the race started about a quarter to 2 Pacific time here. Great effort out there. Unfortunately, we did see some accidents that wiped out drivers very early. Tom Blomqvist, Pietro Fittipaldi, and Marcus Ericsson being wadded up in the short chute there on the first lap. Heartbreak for all of them. Marcus Armstrong blowing up not long after that, and then Catherine Legg on the ensuing restart. The garage area filled up very quick, but again, sometimes an entire, I guess weeks effort or a couple of weeks, it's not a full month anymore, of, all that can just kind of go away that quickly. And that's what makes it that much more of a difficult race to win. We saw some big names that had some big trouble in this one too. Will Power crashing out. Colton Herta was in the top 10, looked really good, and then having trouble there too. So exciting race. I really enjoyed it. I think, again, I've always been saying that the Indy 500 has really gone through a renaissance, I'd say, since 2010 or 2011. I think pretty much every Indy 500 since then has been great. I know some people say that Tony Kanon's in 2013 wasn't good because it ended under caution. Nope. I like the fact that it did, because that way he got to hear everybody cheering for him after he finally won the dang thing. What was it? When Will Power won it, what was that, 2018? Or people say that one was boring? Are you kidding me? When Stephen Wilson, Justin Wilson's brother, was leading it in the last 10 laps until he had to pull off to get fuel, I was excited as heck in that. And, of course, Will Power trying to, win the oval of all ovals after being Mr. Road Course for so many years and trying to win a championship for so many years. That was just a major moment. Then you can't, of course, forget about Takuma Sato's 2 wins there. Goodness, Castroneves is getting his 4th. It's been a tremendous race. And I know that IndyCar is going through a lot right now, a lot of questions being raised about what the future of the sport or the future of the event may hold. Again, I can't speak to too much of that. I've heard, drips and drags about that people are concerned, and they should be. I think that an event like this, should stay. I think it should continue to flourish, and hopefully, if the current partners or owners or whatever are not willing to see that happen, I think that hopefully somebody is found that is able to do that. One thing I can comment on, I feel pretty comfortably, is that charters are not the answer. I think that we know from any of these qualifying sessions that we have seen. I didn't get to talk about this on our Wilkesboro show, but once again, even if you just have 34 cars and only like one guy is going to be missing the show, what high drama we were seeing here when it came down to the final few entries, and how the fact that Graham Rahal keeps finding himself in these situations all the time where no driver is too big. They got to be fast. If you have a big name driver and they're not performing, they may not make the show. We could see, it could happen at any time there. So that should be preserved at all costs. Absolutely. I would hate to see something like the NASCAR charter system instituted in IndyCar or anything, or even just locking in a portion of the field and having a few spots open there. It would so fundamentally change the aura of that event that, I'd think that would be irreparable. So, as long as, again, whatever the future of the event holds or the future of the series holds, I hope that still becomes a part of it there for sure. So again, congratulations to Joseph Newgarden, first 2-time in consecutive years winning the Indy 500 since Helio Castroneves, more than 20 years ago. I think that was a fantastic race. Fantastic. Not because of a bunch of crashes, but just because of just some unbelievable moves, unbelievable saves, unbelievable storylines. Kudos to Larson for staying with it too. I think that, especially given the fact that rain ultimately was a factor in the 600 and we didn't get the full race in, I think it would not have been the right decision. I think whatever NASCAR does, in response to that, I can't imagine NASCAR is upset for him choosing the Indy 500 over. I don't know what Dave Moody was wringing his hands about on Twitter about that earlier. It's like, look, it's the Indy 500. As Alan Sir Jr. says, you don't know what Indy means. You or I probably don't know what it means either. But anybody that actually is able to drive in it, to compete in it, if you're qualified for it, you don't let that get away. You don't let that opportunity go away. Cup championship or not. And of course, Larson's already won a Cup Series race this season, and I'm not a big fan of actually, the playoff system, the way it's set up, and doing these waivers and all this other stuff. It's just really just absurd in general. And I really don't have a problem with. I kind of didn't really get into this in the Wilkesboro show last week. People also kind of, just getting all twisted about, oh, we can't delay this for Kyle Larson to show up. It's like, why not? You can't delay the start of like the All-Star race last week for Kyle Larson to show up. It's an All-Star race. Who cares? It's not for points. It's near Charlotte where all the shops are and everything. It's not going to be an inconvenience to wait an extra, 20 or 30 minutes or whatever it turned out to be in that particular case. Yeah, not a big deal at all. And the fans are going to want Kyle Larson to be there so everybody could get to cheer him. I thought the driver intros for the All-Star race were pretty entertaining. Unfortunately, you're going to have some boos for certain drivers there, but that's always the way it's always been. When I was growing up, people were booing Davey Allison and Dale Earnhardt. That's just what happened, and then they booed Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson. That's just the way it is there. But and I didn't have any problem with anything that was going to get moved around at the 600 potentially for Larson. I think that they certainly were willing to work with it as best they could. I don't see any particular problem with it. I know that at its core, the fact that Daytona International Speedway was even built was because of a bit of a rift between the France family and the people in charge of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, whether it was the Holman family or just in general. I don't think that was, I don't think that's any reason to, say the sky is falling here just because there's, a driver prefers to run the Indy 500 over the Coke 600, and how much positive press was generated for NASCAR just from Larson being in that race, and how many more people I'm sure were attending that race, including first timers. Now you had some first timers that were making a lot of mistakes, I'm sure, that got themselves a little bit in over their head, whether it was standing against the fence in the corners or having just a little bit too much to drink there in the infield. But hey, I mean, they're people that ordinarily wouldn't have been involved in going to see the Indy 500 and now have had that experience, and maybe they are going to take a bit more of a closer look at that series and other events in the circuit. I know there were polls saying that a lot of those fans, haven't really watched other IndyCar races, but that could always change. I think that could be another big part of it. And again, I think this is something I know I've definitely always enjoyed as well. I think that's very different from for example, a Cup driver running in the Xfinity series or the Truck series. If we come back around to that, worlds of difference between going into almost a completely different discipline of racing, whether it's IndyCar or Formula One or rally racing or snowmobiles or just anything. I think anything that gets, Cup drivers out there is something that's positive for the sport. I mean, Andy Belmont told me in that interview about how, there was somebody in NASCAR that would just pick a couple people at random from the garage and bring them to some local short track out there and just have them sign autographs and maybe, run a trophy dash against each other or something like that. And that was something they just did for fun. They would just do that regularly. And that was back in the early 90s. These days, I mean, I guess there hasn't been as much need for that because a lot of these drivers either have their own short track teams or they just decide to do it on their own. But the spirit of that is still there, and that I think that's still important, and I'm glad that's still there. So that's another big parts to look at the same time too. So I think that was another part of it. But great racing at Indy for sure. Kind of get into talking about the racing this weekend, the Xfinity and the Truck Series. Xfinity Series was exhilarating. I couldn't believe how much of the track surface was being used up by these cars. Now, apparently, it looked like it was just swelteringly hot this entire weekend, and that may well have been, again, another reason for that high humidity issue tonight that ended up cutting the 600 short. That seems to be the case here, too. But I thought the Xfinity Series race was tremendous. Again, it got thinned out a little bit towards the end, and it seemed like it was definitely trending towards Cup Series guys going for it there, but which it ultimately did with Chase Elliott pulling off the victory there. I don't think that's the strongest element of that race there. However, again, I think that the racing for what we saw, even with the very flawed camera work, separate from the booth, because we had a driver's only booth on this one, which was a massive improvement, I would have to say here. That gets more and more glaring each year, I really have to say. The camera work was a little iffy. It seemed like it's just on autopilot, and whoever happens to be in the booth is just going to make do with the pieces as best they can. What we did see, I think, was some fantastic racing out there. Very aggressive. Felt like almost a short track. I mean, the Xfinity package continues to be impressive. And as we go into the Portland race coming up next week, and then Sears Point not the week after that, I think it feels like, honestly, it felt like it had been a month since we had an Xfinity Series race. I know we just had the off weekend from the Wilkesboro All-Star race, and we had Darlington before that. It felt like it was so much longer. So it's just kind of refreshing to just see those teams back out there, even with all these Cup guys in there that had no business being in there, like Kyle Busch or Chase Elliott, Ty Gibbs, who was switched in for Almirola for team reasons, and so forth. I think that was, again, I thought it was an entertaining race in spite of them. I thought that was cool. I almost want to give more latitude to Noah Gragson since he had some connection with the Rhett Jones team and getting that new team into the sport too. I mean, we talk about the teams coming back in the Cup Series there to kind of fill out the field there. Seemed like a good, strong Xfinity Series grid there too. Chase Elliott pulling off the win over Brandon Jones, Sammy Smith, and Sam Mayer. Great effort for JR Motorsports across the board. AJ Allmendinger in the 5th spot. Kyle Busch, Ryan Sieg, Josh Williams coming back up from last to finish in 8th. He was looking really bad at the very beginning of that one. Thought I was going to end up having to write another article about him after this one, but luckily had a much better finish. Ty Gibbs in 9th and Noah Gragson in 10th. So again, a lot of Cup Series guys weighted towards the front of the field there. Kyle Weatherman with the pre-race penalty coming back from that to finish in the 11th spot. Shane Van Gisbergen in the 15th position. Anthony Alfredo had an on-track incident, still came back to finish 16th there. Probably could have got a top 10 off of that. Mentioned J.J. Yaley earlier after starting in the last place, coming up to 21st. Leland Honeyman got a little bit of damage there, finishing in 23rd. Had another great paint scheme. The Young's Motorsports team, not just the mellow yellow car they had at Darlington. I think all their paint schemes look great. I don't know if it's just the number 42, which I've always kind of been partial to. I still kind of feel that way with John Hunter Nemechek in the Cup Series, even with all the struggles they're having. Regardless, a good turnaround there. Intense battles up front. Mentioning Allgaier earlier again. I mean, his battle for the lead there, just not quite clear going into the quad oval, getting wrecked and finishing in the 33rd spot. Dean Thompson competing in all but the Cup race this weekend. ARCA, Trucks, and Xfinity. Great effort for him. I mean, I didn't even know he was even thinking about doing this effort going into the weekend. And it would have been great if he got a Cup ride in one of those open teams out there. Unfortunately, didn't quite come together. Maybe this time next year he can work something out on that end. But unfortunately, in the Xfinity race, he ended up back in the order in the 34th spot, a fuel pump issue for the Sam Hunt Racing effort there at the number 26. Riley Herbst ends up being your last place finisher. First for him since Darlington last year when he ran the Ken Block paint scheme. This one here, a tangle with AJ Allmendinger off of turn 2. Looked like he was almost clear, but not quite. Apparently, they've been racing each other pretty hard for position there, as everyone else was, and using up as much of the racetrack as they could, as anyone else was, and just an unfortunate situation. Parker Kligerman, I was surprised he was out of the race. Didn't seem like he had that much damage when he racked off of turn 4. Thought he just had a flat tire and got beached somehow. Regardless, he ended up in the 37th spot. Sheldon Creed, an oil cooler problem of all things. The latest mystery problem here for his Joe Gibbs Racing effort. That was a bit of a bummer. I was wearing my Creed shirt that I picked up in Kansas there for that one, hoping for a good run. But unfortunately, wasn't meant to be there for the number 18, finishing in the 36th spot. Blaine Perkins and the aforementioned Dean Thompson rounding out your bottom 5 there. So again, I just love the racecraft of that in general. I thought it was a very competitive race. Would have rather not had the Cup guys in there, but again, it's nice that it's less often. And I guess with Kyle Busch struggling as much as he has lately, it's almost like the plan I kind of laid out in my mind about having struggling drivers run in the Xfinity series. I wouldn't put Chase Elliott in that category now because he's now won at Texas this year. Didn't really need the extra laps at all. But regardless, Elliott, your winner on that side. The Truck Series race was pretty intense as well. Looked like we were going to get the first last place run for the number 67 in the history of the Truck Series. That's right. Yeah, it wasn't just this year. 67 is a very rare number in the series. Hadn't actually started a race in several years. Jeffrey Earnhardt driving it for Motorsports Business Management, the Carl Long team. Had a pretty cool paint scheme. It actually kind of stood out pretty well. Unfortunately collected in a pretty grinding accident when Tyler Ankrum was turned in the middle of traffic, and it collected a number of the drivers towards the back of the field, all of them trying to avoid it, and none of them quite able to. Thad Moffitt involved in it, Keith McGee as well, and Jeffrey Earnhardt towards the tail end of it there. 67 seemed like he was going to be in last place with Matt Crafton rounding out the bottom 5. Then you come down to the closing stages there, and Corey Haim's crew doesn't quite get all the lug nuts on the left rear. Teams seemed to estimate that they only had 1 lug nut loose. Turned out they had 3, and that was not good because that's a disqualification under NASCAR's rules. And so the number 11 ends up being disqualified from the race, and Haim ends up leading 72 laps and sweeping the stages only to actually get his first last place finish in NASCAR's Top 3 series. If Earnhardt had finished last, he would have actually been the latest driver to complete the NASCAR Triple Crown, having received his first Xfinity last place finish and his first in Cup way back in like 2014, I believe, in 2017. So it had been many years there for that, but he only does the very occasional Truck Series race, but a different situation there as well. Apparently, Connor Jones is still ruffling some feathers. We saw a post-race interview with Daniel Dye where he was not too happy with how he was being raced. We did hear during the North Wilkesboro truck race last week that he was getting called to the hauler. Connor Jones was. Don't know what the nature of that was. We did see during that race that Jones had been involved in an incident and was just kind of sitting on the track for a bit. I don't know if it was about intentionally bringing out a caution or whatever was going on there. Hopefully we get some more information on that story going forward. Unfortunately, the Truck Series will not be competing at the next race that I'll be doing trackside coverage at Sears Point in a couple weeks. Hope we get them back. I thought it was a great race when we had it a couple of years ago there with them. But maybe that'll be something in the future further down the line there. But your winner, regardless, was Nick Sanchez, who held off Haim initially and pulled off the win. I thought Haim, looked really impressive, and especially for one where the truck was having multiple loose lug nuts. It certainly didn't seem to drive that way. Haim is easily the top talent in the Truck Series, I think, right now, regardless of the fact that Sanchez pulled off the victory. He is very impressive. I'm glad he's getting more Cup opportunities like he's going to have a 23-11. It's going to be a real strong effort there going forward, and I'm excited about it. Stuart Friesen in second spot. A great run for him after a pretty lackluster year. Grant Enfinger in third, still looking for the first win for the CR7 effort. Matt Mills with a great run in fourth. Again, matching his top 5 run at Richmond last year for this one now for Nice instead of the KBM effort. Ben Rhodes in fifth. Jake Garcia. Caden Honeycutt was so close to, again, pulling off a tremendous win, only to, again, have an absolute back-breaking pit stop there that just completely took him out of contention. Something dramatic's going to have to be done over there to help him out there because he can't keep losing races of that nature. If it's hopefully Al Nice's team is able to cobble together a good pit crew for him there. I don't know if it's just reorganizing staff from the other teams that they run. But I think Caden has made a very firm statement that he can be the flagship guy like Ross Chastain was for him a few years ago. That Kansas run was no fluke, and this certainly wasn't one either. So hopefully things turn around for him very soon. He can pull off his first win like we saw with his ARCA West first win at Roseville just last year. Connor Mosack, Dean Thompson, and Christian Eckes rounding out the top 10. Eckes as well, very strong in this race as well until he dropped back further in the order here. Looking at other drivers a little bit further back in the lineup, Brett Holmes with a 14th place finish. I don't know how much coverage that got, but a solid showing out of him. Mason Massey in the top 20 there for the Randy Young effort. Spencer Boyd in the 20th spot. That's a solid finish there for the Freedom Racing Enterprises effort there, the number 76. So a solid job out of him there. And then we go on to this next week with Gateway and Portland. Gateway for the Truck Series and the Cup Series, and Portland, the road course for the Xfinity Series. And that will lead us into Sears Point the following week after for the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, and the ARCA West Series. And we're already counting down the days to that, to the return of doing some trackside coverage. So that'll be exciting too. Seeing the mentions here of DNQs. Thank you for mentioning that, Cash X Enterprises. Yeah, on the Truck Series side, for one, we had Justin S. Carroll and Jennifer Jo Cobb missed the show. And then, yes, mentioning Akinori Ogata missing the Xfinity Series race there after just issues on the car. Seemed real crestfallen after that, and understandably so. The Joey Gase team, that 35 effort in general, has just been on a real stretch of bad luck lately. They just need to get some kind of a good run going there, at least a mid-pack run to kind of get their feet back under them. But missing a show is definitely not what they were looking to do going into that weekend. Jade Buford also missing the show in the Xfinity Series. Was happy to see Mike Harmon's team back on the entry list there. Buford reportedly driving the 74 for the rest of this season. Hopefully they cobble together some more sponsorship. The Frog Alley Brewing Company was sponsoring the number 74 this week. I don't know if they're going to run the road courses. We've seen Harmon's team sometimes run them. They run road course ringers like Alex Danielson or, oh goodness, I'm trying to think of another one. I think they had Stanton Barrett in one of their cars at one point there. So that would be great. I'm hoping that Barrett runs at Sears Point because I'd love to be able to kind of follow up with him and get the momentum going on the Rise of the Field Fillers episode there we were kind of starting a couple of years ago. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. There's no reason to be excited about these entry lists here over the next couple of weeks there for sure. But a solid truck race. Again, I think the Xfinity race was a bit better. I think the hot, slick surface and the fact that the cars were fanned out a bit better, the racecraft was a bit more engaging, but, definitely a positive on that end there, too. I guess we could talk a little bit about Monaco. Definitely brought up my Andrea Motors shirt here earlier this morning. I have to agree with the consensus. It wasn't the most riveting Formula One race I've seen. I'm not a regular viewer of it by any means, but Monaco is definitely one I try to circle on the calendar. I just like the just sheer eccentricity of it, where you have to be so precise, and I don't care that it's not particularly a fast track. You don't really have that many real, truly fast tracks in Formula One anymore with all the chicanes and the DRS zones and all the other artifice that's surrounding that sport these days, not to mention the cars being entirely too long to do the precision moves that they need to do to get around these tracks. But regardless, on top of all of that, at least it had a fine ending there. Fine effort for Charles Leclerc, winning at his home track for the first time. I think that regardless of not being somebody that really follows that sport that closely, somebody winning at their home track has just got to be tremendous, especially if you're representing an entire country, not just your hometown. I think that's tremendous. Oscar Piastri in the second spot. Love the McLaren Ayrton Senna tribute schemes they ran. I thought they did a fine job on those. The Brazilian flag colors looked great. Carlos Sainz in the third spot there to complete the podium there for Ferrari. Then looking at the other end of the field, we had, again, much like with the IndyCar race, a very quick, harsh pile up there at the very beginning of it there. Kevin Magnussen and Sergio Perez having some contact out there. Perez kind of shoved into the outside wall and completely atomized the Red Bull out there. But glad everybody got out of that okay there. Just a brutal accident. As I said on social media, again, it was so strange. I mean, again, there's just cultural differences in one sport versus another these days. And I think you really see that, especially on this day, when you see between Formula One and IndyCar and NASCAR at the same time. Drivers going for it on the first lap, you don't do anything stupid, but, trying to kind of position yourself in there and trying to get every spot you can get. I don't really fault Magnussen for going for it in that particular case there. I think that, it could have been that it just happened that quickly, and, they were hyper-analyzing the replays, and I'm glad they were, just trying to figure out exactly what was going on there. But, regardless, it's unfortunate, because I guess there's a point system where I guess if you get a certain number of points, you get suspended or something. I hate to see somebody have to deal with that, but I guess we'll find out what happens in whatever their next event is. The two Alpines involved in an incident, Esteban Ocon doesn't really get to compete in hardly anything of the race. They have a tangle with his teammate going into the tunnel there. I got to say, in terms of paint schemes, I think I mentioned this before back at the Miami race there that was at Kansas. watching that this weekend. I really like the Kick Sauber paint schemes. I think that black and green looks great. I've been just as much a fan of it in the IndyCar with the Juncos team there too. I think they have a really cool style. So yeah, I couldn't help but pick up the hat there that you saw in the picture and the caption there. There wasn't a whole lot of demand for that necessarily there. Plus, just seeing the Sauber brand back in there, that's kind of more. I was saying a while back about talking with Laspro and going to watch a Formula One race and him asking about how HRT and Marussia and those teams are doing. It's like, well, they're not really around and they haven't been around in about a decade. So that just kind of shows how closely we kind of keep up with all of that. But kind of a yearly tradition here still with that. And we're certainly not the only ones on that, obviously, if you have a chance to watch all three races there. But again, great job by Leclerc, and definitely want to give him a bit of a shout out here, even though this isn't predominantly a Formula One show here in general. I do want to transition to talk a bit about the deal with the so with the videos on the channel here too. I didn't get to really talk about the videos on the After Allen deal. Big thank you to everyone for checking out the video this last Wednesday. For those of you who don't know, or if you haven't checked it out on this channel here, I did start a new 3-part series, and this one is designed to just be a 3-part series here on what happened with Alan Kulwicki and Alan Kulwicki Racing between the moment that Kulwicki clinched the championship in November of 1992 through the tragedy in Blounteville, Tennessee, and what happened to the team in the aftermath through the rest of the 1993 season. And that's what these 3 parts are going to cover. We did the first part that premiered this past Wednesday. If you haven't seen it, it's on this channel here. It's about 34 minutes long. That covers a time between November of 1992 right up until the 1993 Food City 500 in early April. So you cover not only the championship and the immediate aftermath, but the first, I believe, 5 races of that season there, the other events in between. I've been very, very pleased with the response on it so far. This was one I really wanted to kind of take my time with and really kind of polish on that. I was really kind of putting this together last winter, and kind of had it in the background of some other projects that I was working on here in the meantime. The opinion pieces kind of came up a little bit later here, but glad to get this one out. If I had timed things even more perfectly, I would have loved to have had it out last year. Although I think with the way things have played out this year, I think this turned out to be a pretty good time to get this together. I'm pleased that there's so many people that are Alan Kulwicki fans still. To me, 1993 doesn't feel like necessarily that long ago, but I know for many people that watch the video, either were not that familiar with him, or perhaps only know him as driver that won the championship and died in a plane crash the next April. Those are true facts, but there's so much more to that story. And I know that even these videos are just going to scratch the surface there at the same time. And I intend to actually kind of build on this at the same time too, because other stuff has come up even just from this first episode that makes it pretty clear that, there's even more out there. I mean, Kulwicki was a tremendously complex individual. His accomplishment in the 92 season was unbelievably massive in the sport, even at the time. Practically unthinkable in the way the sport is today, certainly in the Cup Series. And what happened in April of that year was devastating on a scale that I think thankfully is something that we don't really see, in recent years. But, again, the unpredictability of things and, perhaps even outside the racetrack was very much a story of him, and as well as Davey Allison as well. If you recall NASCAR Man's video from last year covering Davey's career, I wanted this to be a good follow-up where we kind of do very much the same kind of thing with looking at Allen's career here. So, again, I hope that you haven't seen, if you haven't seen the first part of it yet, it is available here on this channel. The next 2 parts, I see your question on that, Jude Fernandez here as well. These are going to be posted on Wednesdays. So they're going to be, their next one is going to be this Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern or 5 p.m. Pacific. That's just the premiere. That's just the time there. If you're watching something else or whatever, it'll be available, after that time there. But if you want to join the premiere, that's when that's going to be starting there. I just said it for that time because I work from home on Wednesdays, it's much easier for me to schedule it around that time after I clock off there to do that. So I hope that time works for you there. The next 2 episodes are going to be a little bit over an hour in length each. If you do not want to wait till that Wednesday, you can join my Patreon, patreon.com/lastcaronbrock. If you join the $5 and up level, you'll have access to both parts 2 and 3, and you can watch the whole thing in just one sitting. So if you're looking for something to binge, I probably should have marketed that a lot more during the rain delays today, but better late than never. So hopefully people are listening to this after the fact. And we have gained a couple of Patreon members here, so big thanks to them. We're adding your names onto the magnet for Sears Point coming up here, and also got together some stuff they got to mail out for Patreon members here too. So we'll get that going there. But very excited about that. And in the meantime, I've been able to, now that I've actually been able to set a 3-part series over a couple of weeks, kind of gives me a bit more breathing room to work on some other projects. One of the biggest that I've been working on this weekend during the rain delays has been the next episode of 500 Days, which is going to cover the spring race at Texas and the surrounding events there. On that subject, I didn't get to mention this again on last week's show. I want to offer my condolences to the family and friends of Eddie Gossage. I had the good fortune of meeting Eddie at Texas in his last race before he retired at the All-Star race in 2021. He was very congenial. We had a great conversation there. I thanked him for the quotes he gave about JD, because I actually quoted him in the book there for his thoughts about JD McDuffie there after his accident back in 1991. But again, condolences to Eddie's family, and I intend that, again, this next episode of 500 Days is going to be dedicated to him. That'll be something you'll see when that gets up there. It just turned out that way, that's going to be the next episode. Certainly didn't plan on anything like that happening, but it seems only appropriate for that to be the case. So I have some very interesting quotes on this one. It's actually, the research itself on this episode has actually been pretty fun. The Texas media at the time actually generated a ton of different material. I have about 63 different articles I'm actually kind of pulling quotes from on this one, and that's before even watching any of the videos. And luckily, a lot of the video has been archived online, people saving qualifying sessions and so forth. So, and you'll see this from one episode to the next in 500 Days. Some have more footage that's available, or pictures or articles or whatever. And, so some may be more in depth than others, but still continuing that chronology is going to be the big focus. And that'll be the case. So I'm very excited about that too. Jude Fernandez, thank you also for mentioning the Danny Ungaius video. Yes, thank you so much for checking that one out. Full credit to NASCAR Man on that. That was his script and his project on that. He's been working on that one for a very long time. The original plan was it was going to be a multi-part series as well. He ended up making it in a 1-part video. I think that actually worked out better because it just bumps right along there too. But a tremendously fascinating individual. I don't follow open wheel racing as much as, he does, as I said earlier. But I felt like I learned a lot from recording that script, and I hope that came across. It reminded me very much of the Ralph Earnhardt video that we did together last year. It had a lot of the same hallmarks from that. So On the Gas, the Donnie Ungaius video. If you haven't seen that, again, NASCAR Man History here on YouTube. Highly encourage you checking that out too. So if you're looking for some stuff on your playlist there, either something in the background on your way to work, or podcast to listen to. I know a lot of people I talked to at Kansas told me about that a lot of the videos on this channel, they may not look at the visuals that much, which is fine, because I use pretty simple visuals in my videos, but they make good podcasts too, and I take that as a compliment. So I'm glad people are enjoying that. But this is going to be, so we have that. The next After Allen episode this Wednesday. So we got the holiday tomorrow, and then 2 days after that, again, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, here on this channel will be the premiere. And of course, after that point, the video will be publicly available and people can check it out anytime. So that'll be coming up too. So very anxious to see what people think about that too. I think that this will be, it's a difficult subject there with this, but as it'll be very clear here very soon. But I think that'll just be kind of interesting to see how it all plays out. Al Bunch, I just saw your comment there. Yeah, thank you for mentioning you're going to the Portland Xfinity race. Hope you have a great time. I know, Ben, you were at the Portland race there before, so I think that'll be really exciting there. Yep, you'll be there too. Okay, yeah, there you go. Right on. So, yeah, so that'll be great. So there you go. Yeah, that would, hopefully the weather cooperates on that one too, especially after all what we saw this weekend. But I think that'll be a different one to look at here at the same time. Yeah, I'm just looking at Silverblade's comment here. Yeah, big documentary coming out in September on Stuart Linden. It's mentioned in the Davey Allison video. Even includes an homage to your 500 days style race commentary. Okay, that sounds great. No, thank you for the heads up, Silverblade. Definitely keep in touch on that. I definitely want to see that. In the meantime, there, I think that'll be a really good. Yeah, that'll be a really interesting subject. Yeah, I'll be anxious to see when that comes together. Definitely keep me posted. Yeah, Sears Point again this year, PG 2248. Yep. Sears Point's the only other race I have planned this year for trackside coverage. I'm going to do the same way I did at Kansas. I'm going to attend I'm planning on attending the, Bob Pockris, Jeff Gluck, tweet up. I tried doing my own tweet up last year. I think that was just kind of unnecessary, especially since I was commuting from home and it took longer to get out there. I'd much rather just join with everybody else's. The big thing for me is I can never find like a good location for it to be. So I'm glad that they kind of handle that. I'd be much happier just kind of piggybacking off that. If that ever becomes something that it's its own thing, we could cross that bridge when we get to it, but I don't think that's really necessary right now. Because at the Kansas one, I was having a great time with that. So I hope that, if you're at Sears Point, and you want to meet up, I'll have copies of the Derek Cope book with me. If you want to pick up a copy, if you have a copy already and you want me to sign it, definitely bring it with you. I'm still looking into getting some book signings done here too. So I hope that we'll get something going there and, kind of build on that too. Getting ready for your own version of the double. I like that, Ben. That's a good way to put it. Yep. The road course double. Alrighty. But, I think that's another part of it too. Therago 1456, senior question on the Stewart-Haas potential downfall and reasons why. I don't know if it's just the Kevin Harvick effect. The timing of it does seem a little bit strange. Obviously, Harvick struggled those last couple of years, especially with the next-gen car before his retirement. And now we're seeing a team that has further struggled with the next-gen car's Dark Horse Mustang. Although, again, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, we've seen both RFK Racing in particular, and to a lesser extent, the Penske team kind of start to get their feet under them with it. I think Front Row has also been consistent. I think they deserve a shout-out there, too. But the Stewart-Haas team has kind of just been all over the place. I know on Eric Estep's podcast, we were talking about Chase Briscoe, and I mentioned that I'm still kind of disappointed by Chase Briscoe's performance. I kind of expected him to be at least as good as like Ty Gibbs is right now, like with the performance, especially how good, Briscoe was in the Xfinity series in 2020. And it may just be that it's a really stacked field and there's just one little missing element that's not there. He's been consistent this year. But again, not that spectacular. We saw Gragson have a wreck in the 600 tonight. We saw Josh Berry have a decent run. I don't know what on earth is going over there. I don't know the veracity of these rumors. But I do know that, again, if there's there are definitely a lot of teams, I'm sure, that are willing to become chartered teams. And the unfortunate reality is that even with NASCAR leaving this kind of up in the air, I don't think they're particularly interested in adding more charters. There's been questions about having permanent charters and so forth and all that, but the number of charters seems like it's never coming up in discussions. And so there's just been this open market with no oversight where if you have one of them that's available because say like a Live Fast or a Starcom closes, it's worth a ton of money. But then maybe a multi-car team has problems and you have multiple ones available and now suddenly they're worth nothing, or not nearly as much, and they can be bought up by other people or, teams that looking to expand if it's Childress or something else. I don't know. I don't know what to expect, but I know that if that is the case, it's definitely going to affect that charter market and perhaps continue this discussion about if we really want this circus to keep going. Or if we want to try a different business model or just go back to the way things were before. I think that's another way to look at that too. Desert Fox also raising the issue of the junior trademark on the number 8 font. That was the other bit of interesting news this week, showing that Dale Jr.'s agency is looking to position itself to acquire the license of the number 8. Looked like it was going to be more for, again, is it going to be more licensing and merchandise? Is it going to be potentially a step towards charters or, starting his own team? If that's the case, then what does that mean for Kyle Busch that already runs the 8 in Richard Childress Racing? I certainly don't see an issue of Childress giving up the 8 to Junior. But again, I think that, again, anything is up in the air. I don't like to speculate too much on things like that. I know that these are kind of the stories that everybody's kind of trying to figure out here in the background, but, I'm perfectly willing to just kind of let it ride and see what happens in the meantime here. So I have no idea. The field could look radically different. If there's a situation where you have a 4-car team that potentially is going to sell all their charters and or if they're not going to be involved in the sport at all, that could have a massive effect. I don't see one team buying all 4 of them, or maybe you have 4 teams that start up with 1 each. I don't know. I mean, we've been waiting for like the 3 Friends team to get into the sport. Obviously this year they're having a great time with Ryan Vargas, and Vargas just coming back from the first leg of his European tour there and driving the number 30 car, the Whelen Euro Series. Are they going to get into the Cup Series? I know they've kind of been one of these groups that's just kind of been waiting on the fringes to kind of make that next step and be able to get, attract sponsors and, develop a program too. Could they be one? Could one of these open teams that we saw today be in that position? Whether it's the Amerivet team, the Money Team effort, or if it's, going to be the Jonathan Cohen effort or whoever else. How's that going to play out? Not sure. But it's going to be an interesting year. I think that's for certain. Let's see. Doot. So, let me check my notes here, too. We'll do some trivia here. I know it's a late show here. I appreciate everybody staying in here. We got 54 people in here with it being 10 o'clock Pacific or 1 a.m. Eastern, so I do appreciate you checking out here in the meantime. We will... Oh, I've seen Christian Espinoza posting the picture of the track being pretty much dry, like completely dry. Oh, that's too bad. I mean, we had a Daytona race. I remember we had a Pepsi 400 in, 2005, that I remember it ending about like 11:30, like Pacific time. I remember watching it very late at night, like that Saturday. And, it was almost Sunday at that point. And Tony Stewart actually won that race. And it seemed like they had no problems with that. But I don't know. I guess just, again, the humidity was just a little bit too much, and it was a different problem there, too. Let's see. Where do I have this here? Yes. Okay. So I do have a couple other things I want to kind of talk about. Oh, yes. I want to talk about the Hall of Fame here, too. So this is one story I thought was kind of just laughable this week, and I know it wasn't the only one here. So the Stenhouse penalty. So we didn't get to we talked about the fight last week. We talked about the accident. And how it seemed basically like it was just a racing deal. I think Kyle pretty much just ran out of room, put himself in the wall, bounced off the 47 because there wasn't enough room off of turn 2, and thought the 47 put him in the wall. And so in a moment of rage, he just wrecked Stenhouse. And I think the fact that Kyle didn't really want to talk more about it this week probably points to the fact that he's probably since seen those replays and just doesn't want to talk about it. Okay. Now we have the $75,000 penalty that got handed down to Stenhouse. In addition to some suspensions there for certain crew members, certain family members, and so forth. While at the same time, NASCAR's own social media page and NASCAR's own media partners are spreading, all just hyping this fight endlessly. We saw it during the broadcast today. And there was some discussion during that week saying like, okay, one hand doesn't necessarily know what the other hand is doing here. That the officiating part is very separate from the media part of it. And that may be true going one direction, but I'm not entirely sure that's the very same thing going the other direction here. And so I'm a little skeptical of that. That may be one of those true but not accurate situations. I don't think that the media side, has any say on the officiating side of things. I don't think that the media showing something is going to make the officiating side rule one way or the other on it, other than just providing footage. I don't think they're going to listen to some argument that's put forward by that. But I think going the other direction, I think where, you have, the officiating side is going to just rule on this, but then you have the media side where it's NASCAR media. It's not the same thing if I'm making a video on this fight, or, somebody else on YouTube is making it or making a TikTok out of it, and this fight's getting out there, which of course has happened. We were talking about it on this show, and other people were talking about it that way too. But when it's NASCAR's own social media that's got their own graphics, so they got their own distinct graphic package they introduced this year, and they're hyping up this fight too and talking about it and getting clicks off of it. I don't think they can wash their hands of that when they have a $75,000 penalty. I think that it does raise questions. I think Chase Elliott's response to it in the Charlotte Media Center this week was exactly right. It's like, what are we doing? And I think in point of fact, if you're going to do some kind of penalty for this, it should just be some slap on the wrist. Why does it have to be some grand thing? I mean, you want these, you want to hype up, these drivers don't like each other, and they're, you think of the Netflix series and how it's like, oh, he's, I don't like this guy, and this guy doesn't like this guy, and this guy had this fight, this guy had this fight, and of course the sport goes all the way back to 1979 and the fight back then. If you're going to have some penalties, you can have something be a slap on the wrist, or have something where they have to do some media work in exchange. Like, what was it? I'm trying to remember the source that was talking about this, but they said that there would be a situation where a driver would get in a fight or something like that. It says, okay, well, for the next 2 days, NASCAR is going to say, okay, instead of you having this time to yourself, you're going to be, doing all these local media gigs and these things you don't usually do. Maybe other drivers or other people from other circuits do this instead, but you're going to be doing it this time. Things like that. The equivalent of not really community service, but like more like, again, just kind of some aspect of it there. And maybe that could be, and again, I think that would be at least being a little bit more honest about, NASCAR not really having a big problem with these fights and all that, because that's a real issue. When you see a penalty like that big, it's not just saying like, oh, well, they broke a rule. It's like, if A, then B. It's saying really that they have a problem with it, that they don't want them doing it, that they're trying to dissuade other people from doing it. But of course, we see this so often, then you don't have the drivers expressing themselves, and they just, you can tell they want to say something, but they don't. And then you get more people complaining that these drivers are boring and they don't want to say anything. And thank goodness we have things like Denny Hamlin's podcast, where he's at a point in his career where he just doesn't care. Jeff Burton reached this point as well during the safety issues back in 2000. And he could just say, because he'd been around for a few years, he felt more open to sharing his thoughts. And those proved very timely back then. And I think in Dennis's case, he kind of has that same deal now. But we're sending mixed messages, and it's not just a lack of consistency. It's just not sending the right message. I seriously doubt Bill France Sr. was, like just really frustrated that Cale Yarborough and Bobby Allison were fighting each other at Daytona. He's like, oh my goodness, this is great. They're going to be talking about the rest of the week, just like the photo finish that Bill France Sr. was dealing with 1959. Some level of controversy can be, something that you can work with. And certainly, I mean, in that case, the social media era is really not much different from traditional media in the past. I think that's the way to look at it. So yeah, I thought that was just really silly. And again, I don't buy the thing where it's like, oh, well, that has nothing to do with this. I know there's some people, jumping on. It's like, yeah, right on. This guy gets it. It's like, no, that's a cop out. Don't tell me that NASCAR, a NASCAR social media is something separate from NASCAR's, officiating department. Where are they both getting their paychecks from? It's the same thing. It's not the same thing you and me doing it here. It's very different. So, again, and I think that's where people are having the problem about it. So, again, I think from I'm going round and round on that, but that's where I come down on that. I want to talk about the Hall of Fame here too. So I was really hoping that Neil Bonnet would get in. I think it's long overdue. I was naively hoping that this being the 30th, past the 30th anniversary, 94, 04, 14, 24, 30th anniversary of Bonnet's accident at Daytona. That this would be a great time to just kind of revisit that and honor a driver that was not only, a excellent driver, winning what was it, 18 races in his career. Didn't win a Daytona 500, didn't win a championship, but was also one of the most popular drivers in the garage area, and became an equally popular broadcaster in that time between 1990 and 1994. Had that show Winners, that fantastic documentary that FS1 put on there where they talked to his widow, was tremendous. And a driver that ultimately did give his all to the sport. Not saying that that's necessarily a requirement to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, certainly we thankfully have a great deal of members that have been inducted, and the person's still with us and able to enjoy it. Hearing Red Farmer's speech a couple of years ago was one of the best ones we've had in the Hall of Fame here. But I thought the time was right. I thought the time was right for him to get in. Maybe Harry Gant, would have been good too. The anniversary of his retirement season at the same time. There's flimsier reasons that people have, brought different drivers in there too. But disappointed. He got overlooked again. I don't know how close he was in the running or anything. But then you had Carl Edwards being brought in there. So Carl Edwards, Ricky Rudd, and Ralph Moody. So first and foremost, Ricky Rudd, I have zero problem with. As was mentioned on, I think, NASCAR Classics page. Now, basically, everybody that was top 7 in points in 1996 is now all in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. I always felt Rudd was pretty overlooked as well, in a similar sense to Neil Bonnet. I felt like he was just like, oh, yeah, him too. Like, you would always hear about Mark Martin and Dale Jarrett and Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon. There were so many big names out there. And Ricky Rudd may not have had the most wins, but that consecutive win streak, that one that Kyle Busch just recently beat, I think is definitely worth renown. Even if it was just 1 or 2 wins a year, it's 1 or 2 wins every year, including the 97 Brickyard 400, including that 98 race at Martinsville, where he, pretty much almost gave himself complete heat exhaustion in the car there with the air conditioning failing. At the very beginning of the race. You talk about, J.J. Yaley with the steering problem there in the 600. It was that kind of a challenge there for Rudd to get through that race, and it's incredible that he was able to. And not to mention him taping his eyes open after the flip at Daytona. The list goes on. Rudd was probably one of, I remember growing up, I really liked the bright orange cars in the field. That's why Derek Cope really stood out in my mind and was ultimately one of the reasons I wrote his biography. But I remember in that 1994 season, then the number 10 was the Tide Ride, and I didn't really fully understand the concept of race teams or sponsorship agreements or stuff like that. But my allegiance kind of went from Cope to kind of, Rudd at that point. And I just kind of liked that color scheme. And I was like, wow, here's another orange and white car. And I always thought it was great. And then, of course, over that time, I learned more about Derek and I learned more about Rudd. And I was fans of really both of them there, then leading into Jerry Nadeau. But Rudd's toughness, his determination and his quiet, just how, how quiet he was. And also the fact growing up at Sears Point, he was always consistently good there. Whether it was driving for his own team, driving for Hendrick further back, or Kenny Bernstein even further back than that, or then the later years when he drove over for Robert Yates and was driving his Dale Jarrett's teammate. This will be something I'll kind of be jumping into in later episodes of 500 Days as well. I'll give you a little preview of coming attractions there as well. I thought Ricky Rudd was a tremendous talent, and I think that it was nice to see that recognized. I had zero problem with that. Again, I do still feel like I was more of a Jerry Nadeau fan just because I didn't think that was probably the first driver I followed where it wasn't really as dependent on the paint scheme. I still pulled for Rudd, and that was definitely the case. I think one of my first internet handles on social media was called Rudd Nadeau Fan. I remember being in a chat room that had that username there too. So that was the case. And there were some great moments there too. But I thought that was great. I thought that was well done. I'm glad he was in there. And I thought it was cool that, he felt that even he thought he was going to be brought in, that he was like raking leaves out of his pool and didn't really think anything about, he'd been nominated a few times and just hadn't been brought in there too. I thought that was great. I thought that was a good effort. Ralph Moody as well. A personality that goes a bit further back. I mean, well before my time. But again, you think about Holman Moody, you think about the branding in that sport, all the drivers that raced for them, whether it being David Pearson, further back, or Fireball Roberts much later on. Drivers that, you always see those haulers in the infield there and the older shots of the Holman Moody logo out there. Definitely makes sense to have a driver that's, or a personality involved with, a team like that be brought into the Hall of Fame there too. I'm still not crazy about this pioneer versus modern era ballot thing. I still view it as the eating your vegetables element of it here, that people just kind of seem to flip a coin as to who gets brought in in that section. I think a good case could have be made just as well for Banjo Matthews or Ray Hendrick or any of the other people that were on that list there too, to be honored for their own contributions to the sport too. But at least at some point, getting somebody in there that's recognized there. At least it's I think I'm more frustrated at the fact that people have to be forced to vote in somebody from a more distant era, the more founding era of the sport. It still feels like it's an afterthought. I think that's the issue I have. It'd be nice if you can just kind of put them all in one pot and just say, oh, well, yeah, this person here and this person here. It kind of makes me feel like there's a large section of the voting group, and I hope this isn't the case, because I know a lot of people on that voting group are the much older set. It feels like a lot of them aren't that intimately familiar with the way the sport was before, say, 2004. And this kind of leads me to my next point here. And Ben, I think Ben Schneider, our staff writer here, if you're still here in the chat, you did a great job here making out a very good case for why Carl Edwards should be in the Hall of Fame and why it's even overdue. Again, I think he makes a very good case for it. If you haven't seen it, it's an article on the website there, and you can check that out. I think that there is certainly going to be a reality in some time in the distant future where Carl Edwards is going to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm just not sure about this soon with those other names on there. And this goes down to the very core of voting somebody, choosing to vote for somebody and choosing to vote for somebody else. And I'm sure everybody that's on that voting panel has their own strategy. It seems like a lot are kind of very much glued to just the raw statistics and say, oh, well, this person had more wins than this person, so this person's more worthy of being in than this person. And I'm kind of willing to look more at the other intangibles there too. I think it's also the contributions that the driver had to the sport. I think it's, other ways that maybe they were an ambassador to the sport besides just being a driver that won a lot of races or a driver that was very talented. I do think that, there's certain elements with Edwards' story that, are definitely worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. And again, I think, his Xfinity Series championship, being a perennial contender for the Cup title, being a popular driver with fans for his backflips and so forth. The commercials. I mean, just kind of remember like the great commercials, whether it was vitamin water or Aflac or anything else, a good brand ambassador too. But when I look at that name again, these are impressive, but then I look at these other drivers here again, whether it's Neil Bonnet for also being a broadcaster, or, again, Ricky Rudd for also having like a consecutive win streak for those many years. And luckily Rudd did get in. Or if I think about Harry Gant, staying in the sport until he was 52 and being the oldest driver to win a Cup Series race, not to mention his Mr. September era. Some drivers that were just like a cultural force in the sport. And again, even talk about Ray Hendrick and his accomplishments in other sanctioned forms of racing. Do I place him above that? I have a little harder time with that, honestly. Because I think for a lot of those drivers, I can't really think of things that would necessarily be demerits, things that would be, things where nobody's perfect, of course, but, I think it is a little bit relevant that he did leave the sport very suddenly, did not do a fan appreciation tour. You don't necessarily have to. Drivers retire any number of ways. I mentioned that in one video on my channel. He kind of dabbled a bit in broadcasting, but I mean, not really. The fact that he was a bushwhacker for a lot of those years, that he really didn't have to be in the Busch Series. that, well, I mean, and just weird moments like the rivalry with Brad Keselowski, and the wreck that they had in Atlanta, and the thing where he pretended like he was going to punch Matt Kenseth. Just a little strange. I think that there's nothing against, being somebody that's a little hard to pin down and maybe you don't understand entirely all their motivations. Danny Ungaius is a perfect example, talking about the NASCAR Man History video there. But I think a Hall of Fame member, I think maybe somebody that's a little bit more checkered in their history there is not a top priority that needs to be in there. That's just me. That's just the way I look at it. And I'm not saying that that's, the right way and everybody needs to do it that way either, because everybody's different that way. And again, Ben makes a very good case on this. But I think that's still kind of bothers me a little bit. It's like, with all that together, and again, Ben, you do make a good point about this, talking about all this also, with that. But, again, you do make a good case in this here, and I don't want to put you in that, perspective, because again, you make a good case on it. And I saw you make those concessions as well about, the Brad Keselowski deal and all that too. But, to me, I think I just weigh that heavier. I think that's the big thing. I weigh that a bit heavier. And for all we know, maybe, a driver like Neil Bonnet or Ray Hendrick or somebody like that, maybe had those moments too. And maybe they're either lost to history or they're just not talked about that much. I read an article about Neil Bonnet, after his tragic accident in Daytona. And this person was just really, really critical of Bonnet. It's like, why did he go back out there? Why did he race out there knowing that he could probably kill himself out there? And then that ultimately happened, and it was really just angry at him. And, I'm sure if you put this ballot in front of that person, he probably wouldn't feel that positive about putting Bonnet in, perhaps for that same reason. And maybe there's people in that ballot room that feel that same way. I personally don't, but I think that goes to more a personal philosophy about, what people do and why they do it and what motivates them. I think that's what it comes down to. And I think it's a little bit easier to understand than Carl Edwards, who was always very private, I think. And I think, I think it's probably, and again, just like Danny Ungaius, just like a guy that, again, very talented, but also, it's like, where do you put this person? Because not all of that was out there. Some people and some figures in the sport, what you saw was what you got. Talking about, Harry Hyde being the crew chief on there. Again, very outspoken. You knew exactly what that guy was thinking all the time. He should have been in there years ago. Again, that part of it. So when I heard Carl Edwards was in there, I didn't fully agree with it. I think someday it would have been fine to be in there, and, maybe where, we got to a point where maybe in the future, we finally get down to like a list of people like Carl Edwards and Greg Biffle and, drivers that are his contemporaries. I know Biffle was on the nomination ballot for this one, but just further down the line, is this as high of a priority? And this isn't entirely the fault of this particular nominating group. It also goes to the Hall of Fame itself. And I know, Ben, you and I were talking about this too. I think the way I personally think is, when they started the Hall of Fame, I think they should have inducted NASCAR's 50 greatest drivers that they picked in 1998. They should have just immediately put them in. And that would have accomplished two things. First of all, we wouldn't have had all these stupid arguments about who deserves to be in more between all those drivers. Say, who deserves to be in more, Cale Yarborough or Bobby Allison? It's like, well, clearly they both need to be in there. They're both great in their own ways. Nobody's going to really say that these are not Hall of Fame drivers. I think that should have been the first demarcation. So it would have accomplished that. Second of all, it would have encouraged much earlier on people to look outside of just Cup drivers. So look at Busch drivers, to look at truck drivers, to look at team owners, to look at media members, to really broaden people's horizons and do it way, way earlier. That would have been a much better idea if we did this back in 2009, 2010, whenever this started. I don't know why we didn't do that. I don't know why they started with like a group of 5 and now we got it down to a group of 3. Like, we're running out of people to put in there. Like, and again, it's really, really silly. And I think the result has been kind of a hodgepodge of people that are in there, and an absurd number that are not in there. And most tragically, a lot of people that, have been, a lot of them that are still with us that haven't been brought into the Hall of Fame yet, that, we're losing, that, that don't get to enjoy the fruit of their labor. Thank goodness, like Ricky Rudd was able to get in there after those many times too, feeling like he'd been overlooked. And look how much that rejuvenated him, that he now feels that he wants to appear at the track again. I hope he comes to Sears Point. Heck, he's got a great history out here. He's the inaugural winner in '89. I hope he makes a trip out here. That'd be fantastic. We saw how much good was done with the alumni group at Darlington a few weeks ago there, where Jeff Bodine and Mike Skinner and those guys were out there. Not all of them in the Hall of Fame, but, a number of them are, others that are in the running as well. I think that's kind of where you got to look at it. So it would have been nice if that happened. I know it's too late to say it now because, they've set on this track and it's what they're doing. And it's very easy to be the Sunday evening quarterback and, say that's what they should have done, but that's what they should have done. That would have made sense. That list of 50 greatest drivers was selected from a very knowledgeable group of people involved in the sport, some of which not involved in the sport anymore. Either we lost them or they're just outside that sphere now. Now what we're left with are people that, their historical awareness, not in every case. Thankfully, there's a number that do remember, these that go a bit further back. But I sense when, 51% of the group there picks Carl Edwards and says, oh, well, of course it's got to be Carl. It's like, well, does he really stand out that brightly? And I just don't. Over Mr. September, over Neil Bonnet, over Harry Hyde, no, sorry. I like Carl. I Lastbro and myself did interviews with him at Sears Point before he won it in 2014. I got nothing against the guy personally. But when you got to make the hard decisions when you're doing the Hall of Fame thing, I'm not on that panel. So the best I can do is just kind of just think about what I would do under those circumstances. And, no, I personally wouldn't put him that high. I'd put him in there eventually, but I wouldn't put him ahead of that group. That's a very tough sell. I'd have to have somebody, and it's not just the wins. It's not just the wins. You got to look at the whole person. And this is something that's been a problem in NASCAR for a very long time. We still do it today. It's why I harp on the broadcast so much. We're only about a couple steps away from just watching traffic go by here and listening to people read memes off on the broadcast. That's about the experience level that we're getting with, the depth of the modern TV broadcast in particular. It was so refreshing. And I want to cycle back to this about the drivers only broadcast there. I loved it that when they showed something irrelevant, that the drivers would just kind of laugh at it and not really comment at it. They wouldn't engage with it or anything like that. And they would just focus on the racing. And I love that they would, the camera, the production would kind of point to this or point to that. And they would seem to kind of bring stuff in there to kind of, mess with the drivers. And the drivers just wouldn't take the bait. They were just that completely invested in the racing, especially for them going into the Coca-Cola 600, all of them racing in it. They probably wanted to focus that much more on the Xfinity race, even though those cars are very different, to understand what kind of track conditions they were going to face, what kind of competition they were going to have, and how the race was going to play out. Perhaps even because of the Cup Series, drivers in the field. I mean, that sounds like a positive in that end for that prospect. And as much as I'm not a fan of that, that would probably be a reason they would be. And I think that was another thing that made that broadcast as good as it was. So, and again, and I know that Joey Logano was remarking that this seemed to be very difficult for him to do, but I really do think that there's probably a lot of elements that are making it unnecessarily difficult. Some of the greatest broadcasters that have ever been around have just said, they just describe what they see. That's what Sir Murray Walker said. That's what Bob Jenkins did. Bob Jenkins just said he was just a fan who got lucky and he gets to talk about racing and that's it. I'm not sure if the modern approach is there. There's too much other stuff that's just kind of in the way. I think they just need to just clear some of that out of the way. And what's great with the drivers only broadcast is they really do, because, they are not that susceptible to a lot of that. They'll get coached along the way, but Carson Hocevar was doing a fantastic job as a pit reporter. I've always viewed that the pit reporters are not really the big problem with the modern broadcasting, because I don't think the approach has changed too much. It's a younger set. I mean, obviously, you had Dr. Dick Bergeron and John Kernan and Dr. Jerry Punch that have really moved on to other things. And so you got a younger set with Jamie Little and Josh Sims and Regan Smith, and I think they do an admirable job in that respect there. So, but it's the booth that really needs to come together and really emphasize that these are not just cars going by. These are people. These are teams. We saw this out of Showalter's interview in the Truck Series race the other day, where he was involved in the sport for the entire history of the Truck Series and celebrated that win with Nick Sanchez and just saw the emotion. Very reminiscent of what we saw at a Greg Van Alst when he won the ARCA race at Daytona last year. These are people, and you need to let a moment breathe. You need to let, the human drama play out, and not just, ooh, this guy doesn't like this guy, or, this person's angry about this. Just like, who are these people? What really drives them? That's one thing I really liked about the Netflix show. It really showed kind of the human aspect of it. It kind of let down the veil a little bit, and these drivers just being just very candid about, just their life outlook. I've never been a big fan of necessarily the special interest piece that's just entirely on that, but there's a time and a place for it. And I think the context is, not just who the person is, but how their history in the sport has shaped them. Again, a driver like J.J. Yaley, who has driven for an innumerable number of different teams over the years, big teams and small, drove for Joe Gibbs Racing, was a highly touted rookie, has been all the way to the other side of it, driving start and park entries in all three series, and startup organizations where they're just trying to get, things pieced together, like the Jonathan Cohen effort. How has that affected his character versus maybe a driver like a William Byron that's been a development driver for KBM or Hendrick his whole life and went on a, much less, uneventful kind of path in there, but a tremendous talent in the sport there too. How different those people are and how that affects their racing and what they race for. I think that's important, and being free to express that, I think is really important. So, that's another part to look at. And actually, this is another thing I kind of overlooked from the Xfinity Series race, and something I didn't really talk about from that one, because I actually went out and saw Furiosa at the end of the Xfinity race there, because we were just checking a showing at it there. But watching it afterwards, the wreck between Austin Hill and Cole Custer, I do think there's probably a bit of an Austin Hill problem here. And I am firmly in the category here that, yeah, he should be suspended. Not just because of this one incident with Cole Custer, but within the context of these other incidents that he's had over the years. I don't know what happened to this guy once he went over to Childress. I thought he was, when he was driving Hattori entries and kind of sharing that ride with Carl Long's team and kind of getting his feet under him, seemed like just a pretty down-to-earth driver here. But suddenly, the fangs have come out here somehow with him at Childress. And when you have this sense of entitlement, I almost sense a little bit, when there's, it's like, it just getting that upset at a racing deal. We've seen this from other drivers before. Tony Stewart went through a phase like this. He's not alone in this respect. I'm not going to pretend that this is like the first time this has ever happened. Far from it. But in times when it does happen, usually there's got to be some kind of corrective force at play. Kurt Busch went through this. Ernie Irvan went through this. It happens over and over, and there's always going to be some driver that's like that. But you first got to recognize who that driver is. That deal with Cole Custer was stupid. He could have really hurt Cole Custer in that accident. When a car wrecks, it is already wrecked, when it's already lost the rear clip, wrecking it again is potentially dangerous. I think it's actually worse than the Kyle Busch and Ron Hornaday thing, because at least Hornaday's truck was perfectly intact when Kyle Busch forced him into the outside wall there at a very fast track. Custer's car was already wrecked. And how often do we hear in these accidents that the second hit is the one that really hurts the driver? This very easily could have been another situation there. I'm surprised he wasn't parked. I'm shocked he wasn't. David Gilliland got parked for doing that to Juan Montoya at Texas. He could have been at least put in the penalty box for a couple of laps. I think that would have been too light of a penalty for this. Again, speaking about Carl Edwards, him flipping Brad Keselowski into the wall at Atlanta, that got Carl parked. I don't know what the thinking was there, and I don't know if NASCAR just doesn't see a problem, or if they're just planning on dealing with that later in the week. But I think that was a bridge too far. Now, and again, much like with the Kyle Busch and Ricky Stenhouse thing in Wilkesboro, a racing deal. I think up until that point, up until the point where he wrecked Custer at the end of the straightaway, it was just a racing deal. Both of them, maybe they made contact, cut down Hill's tire. Hill's car goes up the track, gets into Custer, puts him in the wall. Up until that point, no harm, no foul. That stuff happens in racing. I saw that happen constantly in the All-Star race at Charlotte back in 2000. Not a new thing at all. Very easy for that to happen because, you have those painted lines in that quad oval, but people are going to be crossing them all the time and merging onto each other and trying to find a different line. And everybody, again, running every possible groove on this track. It was a brutally competitive race and, very intense competition out there. And it just so happened that he got caught up in it. But him responding in that way and then also not taking accountability for it, no. I think NASCAR should step in on that. And now again, I'm not the kind of I'm not saying like you do something even crazier than that, but I think a one race suspension just kind of calm the guy down a bit here. Probably wouldn't hurt, especially at a road course there where people's tempers can just, get blown up there that easily too. He's got a lot of talent. He's a very talented driver. When he made his debut in the Cup Series, driving the 33 car, got that top 20 finish at Michigan. That was noticeable. That was exciting. And I'm sure the Beard Motorsports team appreciates his expertise out there, helping that program since they're one of the smaller open teams out there too. But you can't just let him keep doing that. And Custer was very right to be as outspoken as he was on that. I thought that was dumb, and I thought that NASCAR didn't handle it right, and I hope they handle it properly this week. Whether or not they will, well, I guess we're going to find out. But that's kind of where I view it there. So, that's about all I have to say about the races this weekend. So if you guys have any other questions from talking about this, so looking at the races this weekend, if you have any other questions from this, I'll kind of check my notes here too, but we'll do some trivia questions here to kind of wrap this up. I'm still going to try to find that Rudd fan club stuff. Remember the Jerry Nadeau video I did, and I showed like the fan club certificates. I was actually in Rudd's fan club about the same time, 1999 through about 2004, 2005, thereabouts. I think when he was stepped away in 06, I don't remember if they did one in 07. I think by that point I wasn't really involved in those anymore. They probably didn't really have them that much anymore, but that would be another one to kind of look at too. Let's see. So we'll do a couple of trivia questions here to wrap up the night here. And we'll kind of look here. So again, drivers, let's see, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Go ahead and let me know in chat which category you'd like. We'll do a couple of questions on here, and we'll kind of check in there too. Yeah, thank the Lord Herschel McGriff got it last year. Yeah, exactly. What were they waiting for there for sure? That was a big one too. Yeah, Rudd deserved it for the 98 Martinsville race alone. Exactly, I agree. Let's see. Track is nearly dry and could have been finished. Yeah, it would have been nice. It would have been nice if we had the rest of it in there. I think I'm more upset about the Kyle Larson thing not being able to reach that because that was setting up perfectly. That they had plenty of time to cool down the car, talk over strategy, get Kyle in the car, get him acclimated. I think he would have been a shoo-in for a top 10, probably even for a top 5. Who knows what things would look like unless the car fell apart, which is very possible. But Hendrick car generally, you're not going to have that problem, unless it's driver error. That would be kind of the way to look at it. All right, we got a couple here. Uh-oh, chat is froze. Oh, gosh, I hope not. I hope we didn't lose it again. chat still good? Go ahead and mention in the chat if chat is still good here. I hope this doesn't freeze up here. Okay, good. I see a chat still going. That's good. I don't know what that problem was last week. We had something. We weren't having like a rainstorm or anything. It must have been sunspots or something because this thing just was not doing it, and it would not do it all night. I was almost gonna do one on Wednesday when the show was on. Chat is froze on screen. That's weird. If you guys are hitting refresh, is it still loading on there? Oh, it's frozen on the screen. Oh, that's weird. Why is it doing that? Okay. Okay, so it's still working on the YouTube one. Okay. Still boxed. Okay, I don't see any delay. I didn't have any delay set on that. Okay, well, you can disregard the one on the screen here, but we'll keep it going here in the meantime. Yeah, that's bizarre. It's still active here. Here we go. Post-race inspection. The Cup garage is complete. All clear. No issues. This posted by Claire B. Lang 38 minutes ago. Numbers 45 and 34 will come back to the R&D Center for teardown and engine dyno. Number 99 of Suarez and the 3 of Austin Dillon will come back to the R&D Center for engine dyno. So again, all clear. No issues. This is about a half an hour ago. So again, yeah. So we do have that update there. One thing I would suggest with the 600, I'm just gonna put this out here while everybody's picking their category. Oh, now it's moving again. Okay, yeah, I just kind of checked the category. So I really like the Memorial Day tributes they do for the 600. I think that's gradually evolved over the years. Where I like that they put the names of the fallen service members on the windshield of the cars. Apparently, they do something with the families of those members there, and you can look up who they are. The 600 Miles of Remembrance program. I think that's a great effort. I think that on top of the traditional opening ceremonies with taps and the 21 gun salute and all that, you have to do that. It's Memorial Day weekend, much like you would have over at Indy. I think Charlotte's always put on a great program there. I almost reluctant to say it, but I'm just gonna say it though. I'm not a big fan of the freezing the field at the halfway point. I think that's a bridge too far, and I know where that came from. That came from the 2009 Coca-Cola 600, which was run on Memorial Day. It wasn't, of course, it wasn't scheduled on Memorial Day. It got moved to Monday there because of the rain. How the more things change, the more they stay the same. And because of that, they were going to have like a time of remembrance, and it just kind of coincided with when the race was being postponed to, and it was about halfway through the race, and they did like a stop on the field, and it was a profound moment. I thought it was a cool thing they did at the time. I don't think they really. It's a little much for the 600. I think once the race starts, and then you kind of go back to that again. It's there's just a little bit of a dissonance there. I think once the race starts, you could do some tributes or something like that maybe after the race. I just think in the middle is not the best point. Like, maybe you could make it part of Victory Lane afterwards or something like that. But I think the solemnity of the moments, like especially at Indy where they establish it so well, where, when Taps is played, you can hear a pin drop because everybody's so quiet in the stands. I think that's great. I don't see it play out very well with the halfway one. Maybe it's just me. I don't know, but I'm not a big fan of that. I think once the race starts, the focus should just be on the racing at that point, because I think that's 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 really, Memorial Day in general is of course a somber holiday. It's, I would argue, the most somber of the national holidays there. But I think that's I think it's a little too much. I just think it's a little too much. I think the opening ceremony does it so well. And as a compliment to the Indy 500 one, I don't think we just need something on top of it. I think, again, it was just that one time in 2009, it worked really well because it was on Memorial Day. And I think if the race was ever postponed to Memorial Day, probably revisit that again at that point. I don't think there's any problem with it there. But I think doing it in the 600 when it's already a really long race and it's going to go late into the night, doing this while well-meaning And again, the honor remember flag and that program and everything, well-meaning for sure. It's just a little too much. It's just a little too much, and I don't think that's outrageous to say. If there's people that are probably really very, very committed to that, that's great. But I think once the race starts, just like at Indy, the race starts. You remember, and that's in the back of your mind already as the competition goes forward. You celebrate the holiday weekend, but you don't forget. And I think the names on the cars and the opening ceremonies, that does plenty. I think what they've done already, that is great. I think if anything else, it would increase the focus on what already works in the Memorial Day deal there. And, I think that would be better. I don't know if that'll happen, but who knows? Let's see with the categories here. Let's see. Yeah, it went away until the stage is returned. Yeah, see, again, it's probably no problem with the stage thing, too. Do I have Spectrum Internet? No, Xfinity. Yeah, so it's a little touch and go. The California infrastructure here is not exactly the best. So that would probably be the issue. But yeah, we're hanging in here. Let's see. Which category is good? I see a couple for... Okay, Glenn 7000 has a couple for drivers here. Clint Will has drivers. I see one for tracks. I saw another one for wild card earlier. Yeah, they didn't stop post 9/11 races for 9 and 11 in 2001. You'll see, Jude Fernandez. Actually, that'll be something much later in 500 days. You'll find out exactly what was done after 9/11 when it came to that. So that'll be an interesting. Story there coming up in its own right. So those of you who remember, you'll already kind of remember what was done. But we'll go into more of the backstory with that too. That's gonna be an interesting part of it. This was a massive season. And we're just scraping the surface here. We're just getting into April in this next episode here. So a lot more to be coming on that. I see a few for drivers. I'll go ahead and do drivers here. And we'll just do a couple since it's already pretty late here. I do appreciate you guys tuning in here. And we'll wrap up with a couple of these here. If you have any other questions here that I didn't discuss this evening or something else that came up this week, I know, or last week for that matter, because I know we didn't really get a full show last week. Definitely let me know, and we'll cover that as well. First question: who was seen in a 1998 commercial chasing a Pepsi can in his car during a race? Who was seen in a 1998 commercial chasing a Pepsi can in his car during a race? That's our first question. Let's see. Reverend Rob Branning showing I drove 838 miles for the Coca-Cola 373.5. Hey, I get it. Hey, last bro and I, we drove. How far did we drive? I think before we did Kansas, it came out to I think like 1,600 miles. Like round trip, like that was crazy for 400 miles. We were there. Well, we got there for the closest finish ever. It was well worth the trip for sure. Kansas was good. I think the one thing there's two things with Kansas that could be a little bit better. The food could be a little better. The concessions food's pretty run of the mill, kind of middle to lower tier there, which is a little disappointing. And the egress in and out of the infield is not great. It needs a tunnel below the front stretch. If it had that, and then paint another crooked finish line on top of that, I think that would handle that. That would be great. I was amazed how hard it was to get out of that track. But once you get out of the track, the parking is not bad at all. So there's no problems there. Other than that, I had no problem with it at all. Very easy to get to. Plenty of hotels in the area. Great viewing areas. I had no problem doing my coverage there. Internet signal was great. Really liked Kansas. I would love to do it again. We're still figuring out a schedule for next year. Obviously, we're going to wait till the schedule is published before we plan anything here. But between Sears Point and next year, we're just going to be saving up vacation hours. and focusing on videos on the YouTube channel here. And then we figure out what we're going to do. I mean, are they going to do the Clash in the spring? We don't know. Are they going to add something in LA that we can do really quick in a weekend? That would change our opinion too. Can we get a Crown Jewel taken off our list? That would be another thing too, but we'll find out. Alrighty. Has a 10G internet. Yeah, we'll see. Not as fast as Xfinity's 10G. Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm afraid it wasn't last week. I think we were at negative 3G. It was definitely going the other way. Who was seen in a 1998 commercial chasing a Pepsi can in his car during a race? The answer is, of course, Jeff Gordon, who was actually a Coca-Cola driver briefly, before he was pretty much the face of Pepsi in the Generation Next campaign there. Hearing the distances Americans travel sometimes is always crazy. I imagine it would be Benjamin, for sure. Need to get him a cup holder. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a classic. Classic commercial. Alrighty. Next question. All right, looking for a number. How many races did Lee Petty win in his NASCAR Winston Cup career? How many races did Lee Petty win in his NASCAR Winston Cup career? Make sure you aren't out of focus. Okay, good. How many races did Lee Petty win in his NASCAR Winston Cup career? I saw somebody was asking me earlier if I liked Furiosa. It was pretty good. I liked it way better than the first one. I thought the first one was kind of, I thought Fury Road was just kind of silly, which it seems like a strange critique because I'm sure it's meant to be silly and over the top, but it was just too much. It was just go all the way out one way and then just go all the way back again. And I'm like, this is dumb. This is just like, it reminded me of that beer commercial that Junior did. It's like, just because I got Budweiser on the car doesn't mean I have Budweiser in the car. And it's like, I want to watch that for 2 hours. No, this one was better. Furiosa is pretty good. They're not paying me to say that either. I should definitely assure you of that. But I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised. It wasn't bad. I liked that the pacing was way better. Way better. It's still pretty crazy, pretty intense at some points there, but not bad. Not bad. I'd say it's worth seeing. I don't know if it's worth seeing in IMAX, but it's worth seeing. We just saw it in regular screen. That was fine. How many races did Lee Petty win in his NASCAR Winston Cup career? I guess it's for 53, 54, 50. My brain is too boggles for this. Yeah, I know. It's late at night. We'll be wrapping up here pretty soon. We're getting pretty close to the top of the hour here. Alrighty. How many races did Lee Petty win in his NASCAR Winston Cup career? The answer is 54. 54 is the correct answer. Ben, you got it there. And Glenn 7000, you got it first. So there you go. Yeah. And all you guys got Jeff Gordon on the last one. Yeah, the Dale Jr. commercial has a CD player in the car. Yep, there we go. There's some classics. Is that the same one as the lipstick one? Or it's like, this isn't mine. I mean, there's so many great Junior commercials. I mean, it was, not to mention I like the ones with him and Michael Waltrip, where like they're at the beach and then the person like cranks up the air conditioning really high, but there's like icicles coming off like the windshield and stuff. Those are great. Just great times. We were in a golden age and didn't know it. That's usually the way it goes. I think about that today with, some of the racing we've seen this year. Again, tonight was not a good example of it, but the positives have far outweighed the negatives still this year as we go through, I guess, the 1/3 point of the season. So very good, especially with Sears Point coming up and the new pavement. That's going to be good. Alrighty. Next question. What driver wears silver shoes when racing? That's kind of an interesting question. What driver wears silver shoes when racing? That's the full question. Is that Octane 93 you're wearing? Yeah, there you go, Jude. Yeah. I know it's already been done. I think Slap Shoes and a couple of these other channels did a good job summing up a lot of those great commercials. I'll tell you this, a little bit behind the scenes there. When I did 500 Days and I did the first part of it, I had the music picked out from the Sergio Productions theme there, but I wasn't sure what visuals to go with it. I was going to just have like a montage of like race action from like Daytona that week, but I didn't want to like spoil a lot of the stuff that was coming up. I kind of had the commercials as just kind of a placeholder, like the Michael Waltrip commercial, but I was like, this is gonna be kind of too silly. I think it might confuse the tone of it or anything like that. But I kind of liked how it looked because, you kind of, I definitely had in my mind the last shot of it being that Bill Elliott one where it shows like the Dodge off and the logos on the car and stuff. Cause I remember that ad being very slick and I wanted that to kind of be the peak of it there. So that was kind of where my approach was on that, but those were great. I like that intro. I almost kept it the same for the rest of the series, but then at that point, I wanted to kind of, things had already moved past that point. I mean, those older ads were revolving around just Daytona that first week, and that was kind of the theme there. But those were fun. What driver wears silver shoes when racing is the question. Silver. Oh, the wrong track commercial. Yep, that one too. Yep. Classic. Oh, we got Dave Marcus. Yeah, getting a little obscure for someone born in 99. Exactly. Mike Magic Shoes McLaughlin. Good guess. We'll see. Silver shoes, not wingtips. See, you're thinking of Marcus. That's a good thought. But, were they silver shoes? And, they make it seem like it's all the time or not. I think I know the answer to this one, but I don't. We'll see. What driver wears silver shoes while racing? Okay, here we go. The answer, Darrell Waltrip. Darrell Waltrip. That's right. Because I guess it's thinking about 97 when he had the tinfoil uniform. He looked like a volcanologist uniform there. And it was just, I don't know how they made that, but they made it pretty cool. But that was pretty crazy back then. But he must have wore silver shoes with that outfit. I don't know if he ran them all the time. I never thought about that. I wasn't working in the garage area that far back, so I can't really comment. I'd have to look that up. Darrell Waltrip. Magic Shoes McLaughlin. I like that as an answer, though. Alrighty. I'll do one more question here. This is a good question, I think, to end up, because this will tie into next week's race at Portland here. All right, here we go. What driver won the Winston West Series first street race in Tacoma in 1986? That's a hard one. Don't look it up. Try to guess it. I'll read it again here. What driver won the Winston West Series first street race in Tacoma in 1986? That's the question. I'll give you guys a moment here to guess on that. Looking at a post here, Pockrass posted this 47 seconds ago. NASCAR hoped to restart by 12 to 12:30 a.m. So that would have been 9 to 9:30 p.m. our time here. Didn't want to end later than 2 a.m., which would be 11 p.m., which is just now, which is totally get. Didn't see the drawing progress the way they wanted. Apparently pulled the plug based on that. Frustrating, sure, but don't think they went into it thinking they had to call it after a 2-hour delay. Okay, interesting. Well, it's unfortunate. It would have been nice. Yeah, I'm seeing other pictures there of the track pretty much being dry, even with no equipment on it. It's bad. When you call it one point or another, it's gonna be an issue. But yeah, I don't know. I would have rather they pushed harder on it too. But again, maybe I'll just have to take them at their word. It could be that the moisture in the air was just too much. If you're blowing it off and you got more stuff settling down and you're just going to be digging out of that hole the whole time, that could be a problem. Let me read that question again here. What driver won the Winston West Series first street race in Tacoma in 1986? The Darrell Waltrip Quicksilver. There you go. It's not Herschel. I don't have an idea. Tim Richmond. That modified racer Evans, Herschel McGriff, Richie Evans. All right, I'll read it one more time. What driver won the Winston West Series first street race in Tacoma in 1986? And the answer is indeed Herschel McGriff. A lot of you got that one. Ben, you got it. Glenn 7000, you got it. Herschel McGriff, who is in the Hall of Fame. So how about that? All righty. Well, tell you what, folks, that'll do it here. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show here for this evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Congratulations to Christopher Bell for pulling off the rain-shortened win in the Coca-Cola 600 earlier this evening. Joseph Newgarden for his win in the Indy 500. Chase Elliott for the Xfinity win. Nick Sanchez for the Truck Series win. And Charles Leclerc for the Grand Prix of Monaco earlier this morning. The next episode of After Allen is going to be coming up this next Wednesday. That'll be the 29th, I believe, at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific here on this channel. The Twitter feed, at the meantime, is at LastCarOnBrock. The Patreon is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. You can find parts 2 and 3 of the After Allen series for members $5 and up on there. And the YouTube channel, of course, this is this channel right here. For our next show, it will be next Sunday after the Cup Series returns to Gateway. That track's actually had some pretty competitive races the last couple of years with some very interesting drivers and interesting rides. We'll see if that's going to be the trend once more for the Cup Series or the Truck Series this week. And then we have the Xfinity Series over in Portland. So that'll be very exciting. So Ben, safe travels out there to that event. And then we get down to the last week before Sears Point coming up for our next trackside coverage here from Last Car headquarters. And we'll be covering that as well. So be sure to tune in to next week's show. We'll talk about the race action from the weekend, any news that comes up there. And we'll do a preview of the Sears Point weekend. So don't miss it there as all. So have a great week, everyone. Stay tuned for After Allen this week. Have a safe week. And I'll see you all next time. Have a happy Memorial Day weekend, everyone.